Listen carefully. There are two versions of you. The one who talks and the one who transforms. And the funny part? You keep feeding the wrong one. Every time you choose comfort over discipline, every time you say, just this once, every time you let distraction steal another hour of your life, you are voting. Voting for weakness, voting for average, voting to stay in the crowd. And the crowd is full. The 1% mindset is not loud. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to be seen. It is built in silence. In the mornings, you wanted to quit. In the nights, you felt empty. In the moments where nobody would have blamed you for giving up, but you didn't. That is the difference. Not perfection, not luck, not some fantasy of becoming fearless overnight. No, it is choosing discipline while fear is still in the room. Choosing order while chaos is still clawing at your mind. Choosing effort while your body begs for ease. 1%, a tiny number, a brutal standard, a lonely road. But if your mind is right, that road becomes your kingdom. First, most people think the 1% mindset begins when life finally becomes clear, when the plan is perfect, when confidence arrives, when the fear disappears. That's cute. That's also why they stay exactly where they are. It begins in confusion, in the ugly hour, in the boring morning, in that moment when your bed is warm, your body is heavy, your mind is foggy, and nobody would blame you for doing nothing. That's where it starts. Not in motivation, in decision. You wake up at 6, your room is cold, your eyes burn a little, your phone is right there, glowing, begging, promising 10 soft minutes that become 40, and your mind says, just today, just rest a little, just a little more. That voice sounds kind, familiar, reasonable. It is the voice that has buried more potential than failure ever did. The 1% mindset is the ability to recognize that voice and disobey it. A student does it when he studies while his friends are laughing outside. A man does it when he keeps working after getting ignored, mocked, underestimated. A woman does it when she builds herself quietly instead of wasting years explaining her worth to people who already decided not to see it. Real life, real pressure, real resistance. Not movie scenes, not speeches, just small, brutal choices made again and again. Because that's the part nobody likes, The truth that power looks repetitive before it looks impressive. You do not become dangerous the day you feel unstoppable. You become dangerous the day you become reliable to yourself. And once that starts, something shifts. Quietly. Almost too quietly to notice at first. By then, the crowd still thinks nothing is happening. Second, people love to romanticize discipline after they see the result. after the body changes, after the money shows up, after the silence turns into status. Then suddenly everyone says, ah, yes, he was focused. He was built different. Built different? No. He just kept going on days that would have made most people disappear. That's what nobody respects in real time. The invisible phase. The phase where your work looks small, your results look late, your progress looks almost embarrassing. You go to the gym and still look the same. You work on your craft and still sound average. You post, build, study, practice, repeat, and the world gives you nothing back. Nothing. And that is exactly where the 1% mindset separates itself from ordinary people. Ordinary people need evidence before effort. The 1% give effort before evidence. That is a monstrous difference. Because most people are not lazy in the dramatic way. Not really. They are lazy emotionally. They stop when they feel unseen. They slow down when they feel foolish. They quit when progress becomes too quiet to impress anybody. Look at real life. A young man starts learning a skill online. First week, he's obsessed. Second week, still excited. Third week, nothing. No praise, no visible reward, no miracle. Suddenly he's confused. Suddenly he's rethinking the path. No, he isn't confused. He's in withdrawal from instant validation. And if you cannot survive that stage, you will never touch excellence. A boxer does not become feared in the ring because he had one aggressive night. He becomes feared because he trained while tired, while sore, while nobody filmed him, while nobody clapped. A student does not suddenly become top of the class because of a lucky burst of motivation. It happens when he reads the extra page after his brain starts begging for escape. A business owner does not rise because of one clever idea. It happens because he keeps showing up after doubt has already taken a bite out of his chest. That's the ugly truth. The 1% mindset is not glamorous. It is stubborn. It is repetitive. It is deeply unfair to your excuses. And the frightening part? Once someone learns to work without immediate reward, they become very hard to stop. Third, most people destroy themselves with one habit so common, so socially accepted, so pathetic, that they don't even notice it happening. Comparison. Not inspiration, not learning. Comparison. The poison. The little silent theft of energy that happens when you look at somebody else's chapter 20 and start hating your chapter 2. That is how weak minds bleed. A man starts going to the gym. 3 weeks in, he feels stronger, cleaner, sharper. Then he sees another man online, bigger, leaner, louder, admired. And suddenly his own progress feels worthless. A girl starts building discipline, reading, working, fixing her routine, becoming more grounded. Then she sees someone else moving faster, shining sooner. And just like that, her peace is broken. Not because they failed, because they looked sideways. The 1% mindset refuses that trap. It understands something brutal. The crowd competes for attention, but the elite compete for alignment. They ask different questions. Not, am I ahead of him? No. They ask, am I better than I was when nobody believed in me? Am I sharper than the version of me that loved excuses? Am I still moving when the mood is gone? That is a different species of thinking, because once your standards become internal, you stop being controlled by the pace of other people. And that changes everything. You waste less time performing, less time doubting, less time making dramatic speeches about your potential. You become quieter, more precise, more dangerous. You begin to understand that envy is just admiration corrupted by weakness. So when others are distracted by who is winning faster, you keep building. And very, very often, the one who stopped looking around is the one nobody sees coming. Fourth, most people are not destroyed by failure. No. Failure is loud. Failure is honest. Failure at least tells you something. What really ruins them is inconsistency, the start-stop cycle, the little bursts of intensity followed by long, sleepy disappearances. That pattern looks harmless. It is lethal. Because every time you promise yourself, this time I'm serious, and then vanish the moment it gets uncomfortable, you teach your own mind a lesson, a dangerous one. You teach it that your words mean nothing, that your plans are theater, that your ambition is just another emotional episode. Look at real life. Someone starts waking up early, training, eating clean, reading, focusing. 3 days, maybe 6, maybe 10. He feels powerful, different. Then one rough night happens, one tiring morning, one bad mood, and suddenly the whole structure collapses. Not because it was impossible, because it was never rooted. It was excitement pretending to be discipline. The 1% mindset does not trust intensity. It trusts repetition. That's what makes it terrifying. The elite are not always the most hyped, the most emotional, the most visibly obsessed. Sometimes they look almost boring, calm, mechanical, precise. They do the work on the good day, yes, but more importantly, they do a version of the work on the bad day. That is where identity is forged. Not in the perfect week, in the interrupted one. A writer who writes 1 page when his mind feels dull will beat the genius who only writes when inspiration visits. A fighter who trains lightly on the day his body feels heavy still protects the chain. A student who studies 20 focused minutes instead of quitting completely keeps the signal alive in his mind. I am still that person. That matters more than people understand. Because once a person becomes consistent enough to trust himself, his excuses start sounding small, and his future starts getting very, very nervous. Fifth, most people don't have a time problem. They have a leakage problem, a slow bleed. Tiny, stupid, glittering distractions that look harmless because each one only steals a little. 5 minutes here, 10 there, 1 scroll, 1 video, 1 pointless conversation, 1 unnecessary check, 1 small break that melts into an hour. And then they say life moves fast. No, you are moving carelessly. That is the difference. The 1% mindset understands that greatness is rarely destroyed by one dramatic mistake. It is usually eroded by casual disrespect toward time. Not evil, not tragedy, just softness, just looseness, just a mind with no gate on it. Look at real life. A man says he wants to change his body, but every night he hands his attention to nonsense until 2 in the morning. Then he wakes up tired, skips training, calls it one of those days, and repeats the same sabotage with a different excuse. A student says she wants mastery, but she studies with 10 tabs open, her phone face up, music pulling at her nerves, messages slicing her focus into pieces. Then she wonders why 2 hours of work feel empty. Empty? Because scattered effort creates scattered identity. The 1% mindset is ruthless about attention. Not angry all the time, not dramatic, ruthless. It knows that where attention goes, the self follows. A distracted mind becomes a weak mind. A weak mind becomes an undirected life. And an undirected life? It starts looking busy from the outside while rotting from the inside. That is why the elite protect their focus like a private kingdom. They don't let every mood enter. They don't let every notification interrupt. They don't let every bored impulse sit on the throne. Sometimes the difference between average and exceptional is not talent, not luck, not even courage at first. It is this: who can stay with one hard thing long enough without escaping? A writer finishing the paragraph instead of checking the phone. A fighter completing the round instead of admiring his own fatigue. A builder sitting in silence with one task while his brain begs for sugar, novelty, noise, relief. That is where real power starts to gather, quietly, almost invisibly. And after a while, the person who once could not sit still for 10 minutes becomes the one others cannot keep up with. Sixth, most people think confidence is the reward, the shiny thing at the end, the feeling, the posture, the look in the eyes, the steady voice, the clean handshake, the calm walk into the room. No, that is just what confidence looks like after it has already been built somewhere darker. Confidence is not born from comfort. It is born from proof. And that is where most people get trapped. They wait to feel confident before they act. They say, when I believe in myself, I'll start speaking, I'll start building, I'll start posting, training, applying, risking, moving. But belief rarely comes first. Action does. Repetition does. Surviving your own doubt does. Look at real life. A young man wants to speak better, lead better, carry more weight in a room. But every time he gets the chance, he hesitates. His throat tightens. His thoughts scatter. He starts second-guessing his own voice before it even leaves his mouth. So he stays quiet, then goes home and hates himself for saying nothing. Not because he is weak forever, because he keeps asking confidence to appear before he has earned any evidence. The 1% mindset reverses the order. You act first, messily maybe, uncomfortably, definitely, imperfectly, almost always. Then confidence begins to gather. A fighter becomes calm in the ring because he has been hit before and did not break. A business owner becomes bold in negotiation because he has survived rejection enough times to stop worshiping approval. A student becomes mentally sharp in exams because he has sat with pressure before, breathed through it before, answered while afraid before. That is real confidence, not ego, not noise, not pretending to be untouchable. Proof. And here is the cruel part most people do not want to hear. If you avoid the very situations that would build you, you stay fragile. You stay dependent on mood, on praise, on lucky momentum. You keep trying to protect your image instead of strengthening your core. You become polished on the surface and hollow underneath. That is why some people look impressive for 10 minutes and collapse under real pressure. The 1% mindset is different. It does not chase the feeling of confidence. It chases the actions that produce it. It says, I will do the hard conversation. I will take the extra set. I will ask the question. I will publish the work. I will show up while my voice still shakes. Because the shaking is not the end of strength. It is often the beginning of it. A man walks into an interview with fear in his stomach, but he speaks anyway. That matters. A woman starts a project while doubting every line, every move, every idea, and still keeps going. That matters. A person returns to discipline after messing up for 3 days instead of disappearing for 3 months. That matters more than all the motivational speeches in the world. Because every kept promise leaves a mark. Every difficult repetition leaves a trace. Every moment you do not run from discomfort deposits something into your character. Not visible at first, but real. And then one day, people see your presence and think it is natural. They see your calm and think you were simply born with it. They hear your voice and think certainty has always lived there. They never see the older version, the one who trembled, the one who overthought, the one who almost backed out at the door, the one who had to force himself again and again to stay in the fire a little longer. But that is the one who built everything. So no, the 1% mindset does not ask, how do I feel more confident? It asks something far more dangerous. What am I avoiding that would make me undeniable if I faced it? Seventh, most people think pain is a sign to stop, a warning, a red light, a message from life saying, no, this is too much for you. Turn around, go back, find something softer. And sometimes pain does mean stop. Real injury, real danger, real harm, yes. But most of the pain that ruins people is not that kind. It is the pain of growth, misinterpreted. The pain of waking up earlier than your habits want. The pain of holding your tongue when your ego wants a performance. The pain of training when your muscles complain. The pain of studying when your brain starts whining for escape. The pain of being alone long enough to hear your real thoughts without noise covering them. That pain is not your enemy. It is often the first honest conversation you have had with yourself in years. And weak minds confuse discomfort with damage. Look at real life. A man starts lifting seriously. His body aches, his appetite changes, his schedule tightens, his comfort dies a little. Suddenly he says, maybe this isn't for me. Not for you. No, it is simply asking a version of you to die. The soft version, the chaotic version, the version that wants results without reorganization. A student tries to focus for real, 1 hour, deeply, honestly. No switching, no little escapes. After 20 minutes, his mind starts clawing at the walls, restless, annoyed, irritated. His body is sitting still, but internally it feels like withdrawal, because it is. He is withdrawing from stimulation, from fragmentation, from being mentally owned by novelty. And if he misreads that discomfort as, I can't do this, he walks right back into a weaker life. A person tries silence for the first time. Real silence. No music, no endless messages, no constant outside input. Just stillness. And suddenly they feel uneasy. Their chest feels strange. Their thoughts get louder. Old regrets drift up. Unfinished fears show their face. That is when most people run. They call the silence boring, when really it is exposing them. The 1% mindset learns to sit there. That is the difference. Not because it enjoys pain in some childish way. Not because suffering is glamorous. Not because misery is noble. No. Because it knows that discomfort is often the tax you pay when leaving an old identity behind. A fighter feels the lungs burn and stays sharp anyway. A builder feels the loneliness of long effort and keeps building anyway. A man trying to clean up his life feels the itch to go back to old habits, old people, old poison, and does not obey it. A woman rebuilding her standards feels the ache of losing attention, losing approval, losing the familiar chaos she once mistook for love, and still does not return. That is not punishment. That is transformation with its mask off. And here's where it becomes dangerous. Once you stop panicking every time life becomes uncomfortable, you stop being easy to control. Think about that. How many people are manipulated by comfort? How many stay in weak routines because they are familiar? How many stay in bad relationships because loneliness feels sharp for a few nights? How many keep cheap habits because discipline stings in the beginning? How many trade a powerful future for temporary relief again and again and again? Too many. The 1% mindset breaks that deal. It says, I do not need every day to feel pleasant. I do not need every step to feel natural. I do not need comfort to confirm I am on the right path. Sometimes the right path feels clean. Sometimes it feels heavy. Sometimes it feels humiliating before it feels rewarding. Sometimes it feels lonely before it feels liberating. But if the direction is right, discomfort becomes information, not an order. That is why some people collapse the moment pressure rises, while others become clearer, calmer, more precise. One has trained only in ease. The other has learned how to breathe inside friction. And once a person can do that, pain stops being the thing that breaks him. It becomes the thing that introduces him to himself. Eighth, most people do not lose because they are weak. They lose because they are divided. One part of them wants greatness, another part wants sleep. One part wants discipline, another wants comfort, attention, shortcuts, excuses, little pleasures, soft escapes. And every day that inner civil war stays unresolved, they leak power. That is the part nobody tells you. The 1% mindset is not just about working harder. No. Plenty of people work hard for a week, some for a month, some even for a year. But internally, They are still negotiating with weakness, still asking laziness for permission, still trying to drag their future forward while secretly feeding the habits that are strangling it. That split destroys momentum. Look at real life. A man says he wants a powerful body, but he keeps flirting with the same routines that made him soft. He trains hard, then rewards himself with chaos. Sleeps badly, eats carelessly, scrolls late, wakes up foggy, then acts surprised when his progress looks confused. Confused? Of course it is. His effort and his lifestyle are speaking two different languages. A student says he wants excellence, but his mind is still married to distraction. He studies with intention for 40 minutes, then gives his nervous system 3 hours of noise. Little clips, little messages, little hits of novelty, until the brain no longer knows how to sit still. Then he wonders why deep focus feels painful the next day. Because you are training two identities at once. And the weaker one is often getting more repetition. The 1% mindset understands something brutal. Your results obey your dominant pattern, not your occasional ambition. That means your random burst of motivation means nothing if your daily structure keeps voting against it. Your dramatic promises mean nothing if your environment keeps pulling you back into the same broken rhythm. Your vision means nothing if your habits laugh at it in private. That is why serious people become selective, quietly. They stop treating everything equally. They stop letting every person speak into their mind. They stop saying yes to every invitation, every distraction, every emotional storm. They begin to notice that some things do not look dangerous, but they weaken them, slowly, repeatedly, almost politely. And that is enough to ruin a life. A weak conversation can pull you out of your center. A weak environment can make discipline feel abnormal. A weak routine can make high standards feel extreme. A weak circle can make ambition sound arrogant. So the 1% mindset starts cutting, not with drama, not with speeches, with clarity. Less noise, less access, less compromise, less pretending, less returning to the same poison because it feels familiar. A man becomes dangerous when his schedule, his habits, his thoughts, and his standards begin moving in one direction. A woman becomes dangerous when her boundaries, her time, her attention, and her self-respect stop contradicting each other. That is when energy returns. That is when effort starts multiplying instead of evaporating, because now the war inside begins to quiet down. And when that happens, something almost frightening appears: precision. You wake up and know what must be done. You feel resistance and do not turn it into a debate. You feel temptation and see through it faster. You stop performing discipline and start living from it. That is different, very different. Because a divided person can be delayed, distracted, seduced, exhausted. But a person whose inner world is aligned, he becomes hard to bend, hard to confuse, hard to bait, hard to stop. And most people do not even realize how much of their suffering comes from living against themselves. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You start noticing where your habits betray your goals, where your comfort betrays your future, where your environment betrays your focus, where your small exceptions are actually little doors left open for weakness. And one by one, those doors begin to close. Ninth, Most people think self-respect is a feeling, a mood, a sentence, a nice little belief they repeat to themselves when life hurts. I know my worth. Do you? Because your habits are answering that question far more honestly than your mouth ever will. That is where the 1% mindset becomes uncomfortable. It does not ask what you say about yourself. It asks what you tolerate, what you repeat, what you return to, what you allow to touch your time, your body, your attention, your peace. Look at real life. A man says he wants greatness, but he keeps breaking promises to himself in private. He says he will wake up early. He doesn't. Says he will train. He delays it. Says he will stop wasting time, then disappears into the same old distractions until the night eats him alive. Then the next morning he wonders why he feels weak when nothing major happened. Something major did happen. He watched himself become someone he cannot fully trust. And trust in yourself is one of the raw materials of power. A woman says she wants peace, but keeps letting chaos sit at her table. Weak treatment, disrespectful energy, draining conversations, confused standards. People who only remember her when they need warmth, softness, access. Then she asks why her spirit feels heavy. Because self-respect is not built by wishing for better. It is built by refusing what is beneath you. That is the brutal part. You do not rise merely because you desire a higher life. You rise when your standards become expensive. Expensive in comfort, expensive in convenience, expensive in old habits, expensive in certain people, expensive in the cheap version of you that still wants easy pleasure without long consequence. That cost scares people. Why? Because a lot of people would rather keep familiar suffering than pay the price of transformation. They would rather say, "This is just how I am," than go through the embarrassment of changing in public, or worse, changing in private where nobody claps. And that is where the 1% mindset quietly leaves them behind. It begins to understand that every tolerated insult, every ignored standard, every repeated act of self-betrayal teaches the mind a lesson. This is what we accept. This is what we deserve. This is normal. No, normal is not sacred. Familiar is not safe. Common is not wise. A man who keeps his word to himself begins walking differently. A woman who stops negotiating with disrespect begins speaking differently. A person who removes what cheapens them begins thinking differently. Not instantly, not theatrically, but deeply. Because now the mind has new evidence. I do not abandon myself that easily. I do not feed what weakens me. I do not let my impulses outrank my principles. That changes a human being. And once that change starts, something strange happens. You become less available to nonsense, less impressed by noise, less tempted by things that once owned you. The old bait stops sparkling. The old poison stops feeling romantic. The old version of you starts looking embarrassing. Good. It should. Because the 1% mindset is not merely about achievement. It is about becoming the kind of person who would feel ashamed to keep living below his own standards once he has seen what he is capable of. And that is when self-respect stops being a quote and starts becoming a force. A force that makes you leave sooner, choose better, train harder, speak less, notice more. Protect your inner world, guard your name, refuse your old excuses, because now you are no longer asking life to treat you like someone valuable. You have started acting like you are. 10th. Most people wait for a breakthrough like it is some dramatic event, a lightning strike, a perfect morning, a sudden transformation where the old self dies in one clean cinematic moment. It almost never happens that way. The 1% mindset is usually built so quietly that weak people cannot even recognize it while it is happening. It looks small from the outside. A person waking up on time again, a workout completed without emotion, a difficult conversation finally handled, a distraction refused, a promise kept, a lonely hour used well, a bad day survived without self-destruction. Small things, but repeated correctly, they become terrifying. Because that is how identity hardens, not through one speech, not through one night of rage, not through one burst of obsession that burns hot and dies stupidly. No, through accumulated proof, through the quiet stacking of actions that begin to tell your nervous system, your habits, your mind, your whole inner world, this is who we are now. And once that message starts sinking in, the game changes. A man who once needed motivation starts moving before his feelings vote. A woman who once lived in emotional chaos starts protecting her peace like a ruler protects a kingdom. A student who once collapsed under pressure starts sitting inside difficulty without panicking. A builder who once doubted every move starts making decisions faster, cleaner, colder, not cruel, just clear. That is what the crowd misses. They only notice visible success, the body, the money, the calm, the presence, the discipline, the results. They do not see the invisible architecture underneath it. The hundreds of moments where you did not fold, the dozens of urges you did not obey, the nights you ended differently, the mornings you answered differently, the standards you kept when nobody would have punished you for lowering them. That is where the 1% mindset stops being an idea and starts becoming your nature. Look at real life. The dangerous man is not always the loud one. Sometimes he is the one who has mastered himself so deeply that chaos cannot easily enter him anymore. The dangerous woman is not always the one trying to prove power. Sometimes she is the one whose standards became so real that confusion loses access to her. The dangerous student is not the one who talks about success all day. It is the one whose routine is now stronger than his excuses. That is different, very different. Because at that point, discipline stops feeling like punishment. Focus stops feeling unnatural. Boundaries stop feeling rude. Solitude stops feeling empty. Hard things stop feeling personal. You no longer interpret every challenge as an attack on your comfort. You begin to see friction as part of the construction. And once that shift happens, you become difficult to tempt with average. That is the real breakthrough. Not that life gets easy, not that fear disappears, not that doubt never visits, not that pain becomes pleasant. No. The breakthrough is that weakness stops having the final word. You still feel resistance and move. You still feel tired and choose with intelligence. You still feel pressure and remain dangerous inside it. You still hear the old voice, but it no longer sounds like authority. And in that moment, quiet, almost invisible, easy to miss if you are not paying attention, you cross a line, a real one. Not from poor to rich, not from unknown to famous, not from struggling to perfect, from negotiable to decided, from scattered to directed, from reactive to deliberate, from someone who keeps restarting to someone who has finally become hard to interrupt. And once a human being reaches that point, the outside world may still underestimate him for a while. Good, let it. Because by then, the change is no longer performance, no longer fantasy, no longer a temporary mood. It is structure, it is pattern, it is character, it is law. And law does not need to announce itself to be obeyed. So, after all of this, the question is no longer whether the 1% mindset is real. Of course it is real. You've seen it. In people who move differently, speak differently, endure differently. People who are not always louder, just harder to shake. The real question is whether you are finally tired enough of your old self to stop protecting it. Because that is what this comes down to. Not intelligence alone, not motivation alone, not some magical morning where your whole life suddenly aligns. No, it comes down to whether you are willing to disappoint the weaker version of yourself. The version that loves delay, loves comfort, loves fantasy, loves the little lies that sound soft in the moment and poisonous by night. The 1% mindset is not built in public first. It is built in private, in the hour nobody sees, in the decision nobody rewards, in the moment where your excuses make perfect sense and you still do not obey them. That is where your future begins to trust you. And once that trust starts building, something changes inside you. You stop begging life to become easier. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop turning every difficult moment into a personal tragedy. A bad morning becomes just a bad morning. A wave of doubt becomes just a wave. Fatigue becomes information. Pain becomes instruction. Silence becomes useful. Loneliness becomes clean. You stop collapsing every time reality refuses to entertain you. That is when you begin to separate from the crowd, quietly, almost offensively quietly. Because the crowd loves drama, loves announcements, loves noise without structure, loves the image of discipline more than discipline itself. But the 1% mindset, it is not interested in looking serious. It becomes serious. A man with this mindset does not keep explaining what he plans to become. He trains, he builds, he sharpens. A woman with this mindset does not keep handing her peace to confusion and calling it love or fate or bad luck. She raises the standard and lets what cannot rise fall away. A student with this mindset does not worship talent. He respects repetition. He respects attention. He respects the invisible hours that eventually begin speaking for him. That is how power grows when it is real. Not all at once, not with fireworks, not with applause, with structure, with restraint, with standards, with promises kept so many times that the mind finally stops questioning whether you mean what you say. And then one day, without even noticing the exact moment it happened, you realize something almost frightening. You no longer admire discipline from a distance. You have started living from it. You no longer envy strong people in that old, bitter way. You understand them. You recognize the cost in their eyes. You recognize the repetition in their calm. You recognize the private war behind their presence. And you realize you can become that too. Not by pretending, not by talking, not by collecting quotes and calling it transformation. By choosing correctly when it is boring. By choosing correctly when it is lonely. By choosing correctly when nobody would punish you for choosing wrong. That is the test. That has always been the test. So let the weak version of you complain. Let it bargain. Let it whisper that you can begin tomorrow, that you can loosen the standard, that you can make one more exception, that you can drift for one more night and somehow remain dangerous in the morning. It lies beautifully. But now you hear it differently. Now you know that every small betrayal has a cost. Every tolerated weakness leaves a fingerprint. Every repeated act of self-respect leaves one too. And over time, those fingerprints become identity. So choose carefully. Choose what you repeat. Choose what you allow. Choose what you feed. Choose what you obey. Choose what kind of person gets more of your days. Because in the end, the 1% mindset is not merely about winning more. It is about becoming someone your lower self can no longer rule. And once that happens, you do not need to announce the change. People feel it in your eyes, in your pace,